Welcome to Police Academy Prep. This is Deputy Z. Today we will be going through our Police Scenario Response Prep training series focused on preparing you for the road as a law enforcement officer or deputy. This series will include recommended response guidelines for over 50 different scenarios you will encounter and to provide insight as to what to expect and how to respond to given scenarios. So make sure to check out my other scenario response videos after this one. Make sure to follow your agency policies and procedures when responding to incidents. Now, before we get started here, I'll go through the structure of this video. This video will be on natural death investigations only. It will not be covering homicides, traffic homicides, vehicular, manslaughter, suicides, or any of other types of deaths there are. This will be strictly natural death investigations. Stay tuned for future videos on those different type of death investigations. So in regards to the structure of the video, the first thing I'm going to go through is some reference material information on death investigations in general to get you up to speed on how to handle death investigation in general. Then I will be going through response guidelines on how to respond to a death investigation on scene. And then followed that, I will go through how to fill out the medical examiner's natural death report that you'll need to send to the medical examiner and information surrounding that document. And then I will end with going through how to structure your death investigation report. So let's go ahead into death investigations reference material here. All law enforcement officers will respond to the scene of a death at some point in their careers. When you are the primary responding officer, always consider officer safety first, provide first aid as necessary, and then preserve the scene for further investigation. The cause of death may not be immediately apparent, as some injuries may not cause a great deal of external blood loss. The cause of death is the specific injury or disease that leads to death. While observing the body, look for obvious or abnormal signs of trauma, such as the presence of blood, cuts, gashes, or bruising. Look for an obvious fatal injury, such as a bullet hole in the head or chest. Notify your supervisor or investigator of any signs of trauma, obvious fatal injury, or abnormality to the body. A body that is cold to the touch may indicate that the person is dead and will not respond to resuscitation. The eyelids may remain open if they were open at the time of death. The manner of death is the determination of how the injury or disease leads to death. The 5 manners of death are natural, accident, suicide, homicide, and undetermined. Homicide is the act of one human taking the life of another, and we'll go through that in another video. After death, a body goes through a process of changes that include rigor mortis, the stiffening of body muscles after death; lividity, the color changes from the settling of blood due to gravity, often black and blue; algor mortis, the post-mortem cooling of the body. And evidence of changes is most valuable if assessed as soon after death as possible because these indicators change over time. Body physique, individual variation, and environmental conditions can cause post-mortem changes. You may use rigor mortis and lividity to help determine the position of the body at death, and it may indicate whether someone moved the body after death. When any person dies by criminal violence, accident, suicide, suddenly when the person has a history of good health, or through any suspicious or unusual circumstances, law enforcement is required to notify the medical examiner as soon as reasonably possible. As authorized by the medical examiner, coordinate the release and transport of the body to the local morgue, a mortuary, or a crematorium, and do not disturb the body until authorized by the medical examiner. The officer and the medical examiner cannot determine the cause and manner of death independently. The medical examiner, in conjunction with law enforcement investigation, makes the final determination on the cause and manner of death only after completing their investigation, which can take weeks. If the death is by apparent natural causes or was expected, such as a patient in hospice care or with a terminal disease who was seeking treatment, notify the deceased person's physician of the death. You may find prescription bottles at the scene. Examine the bottles for the doctor's name. With this information, contact the doctor for notification of the death. The physician may sign the death certificate. If you cannot locate the physician or the physician refuses to sign the death certificate, contact the medical examiner's office. Identifying the deceased. There are several ways that you can identify a deceased person. The final identification must be 100% positive before contacting next of kin or releasing information to the family. It is vital not to release a name without having physical evidence to confirm it. Premature release of a name later found to be incorrect can be devastating to family members of both the misidentified and the actual deceased individual. Identifying a deceased person can be as simple as obtaining a driver's license information, fingerprint scanner, or comparing the photo to the body. There may be people on the scene who know the person and will tell the deceased's name, but do not base your identification solely on this. Documents on the scene, identification found on or near the body, prescription bottles, and other items that identify a person, while helpful, may not always be those of the deceased. Depending on the condition of the body, one or more of these may not be possible, yet they may be helpful in identifying the deceased positively. Initial response to death. The tone you establish at the beginning of the preliminary investigation will have a direct impact on the cooperation of the people at the scene and the information they're willing to offer during interviews. You may be responsible for an investigation in its entirety or for a preliminary one with another investigator or the medical examiner provider following up. It is essential that you secure and protect the integrity of the scene. Do not move or touch anything. If there is a witness or suspect on the scene who needs medical attention, provide appropriate first aid. Always approach the area as a crime scene and consider it a homicide until the information you gather consistently indicates otherwise. Determine the scope and size of the crime scene to avoid destroying or contaminating possible evidence. Remember to apply universal precautions and use PPE. If the scene is in a public location, place a visual barrier such as crime scene tape between the scene and the public without cross-contaminating any evidence. Scan the areas surrounding the body for potential hazards of evidence by performing a 360 visual sweep of the perimeter. Next, we have some interviewing. Identify, separate, and begin to interview witnesses and take statements. Interview the person who last saw the dead person alive and the person who found the body. Be sure to ask about anything that the witness may have observed or heard, and ask about the exact position the deceased individual was found in, because the position of the body is crucial to the investigation. If they have been moved, this can cause confusion and difficulty in obtaining information that the medical examiner will need in order to determine what caused or contributed to the death. Some good questions you can ask are, how did you find the body? Did you move the body? Did you know this person? What was happening to them with them immediately before their death? What was happening with them in the days or weeks before their death? Did they have a healthy lifestyle? Did they consume drugs or alcohol? Did they have any known medical conditions? Who was with them before their death? Then you have their initial investigation. Determine if you have jurisdiction in this incident. If you do not, refer the incident to the proper agency and hold the scene until additional assistance arrives. If you do have jurisdiction, notify your supervisor and provide information related to the incident, including information from the witnesses. If a detective will respond, maintain the scene and start a crime scene log. If the detective is not responding and you are tasked with conducting the entire investigation, begin to preserve any evidence that you locate. Failure to collect, document, or gather evidence makes it difficult to go back and undo the damage done to the integrity of the investigation. Death scenes can be chaotic and tragic, crowded with emotional family members and witnesses. Families have the right to receive a thorough investigation so they can understand the true medical cause of the death. Prepare for the family's responses. Keep in mind that they may be in shock, distraught, and most likely confused. You may need to repeat information several times. Try to understand the family's level of grief and empathize with what they are experiencing. People respond to death in many ways. Do not jump to any conclusion about the way a family reacts based on how you would respond if you were in the situation. Remain professionally distant, but display respect to family members and loved ones to minimize their trauma. Now, response to an infant death. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention defines an infant as a baby younger than a year old, and infants can die from a number of causes. So keep that in mind. So now we're going to move to the response guidelines. So moving into step 1, if fire rescue verified the death, get personal names and run numbers and the time the deceased was pronounced dead. Include the lieutenant rank or above, name, and their fire rescue number. So if it's Fire Rescue 55, get that. If it's Lieutenant John Smith, get that information, get the run number information, and the exact time they were pronounced dead. Normally, when it's pronounced, the time of pronounced dead will be over the radio, and that will be recorded in the CAD notes. Next, you're going to check the body for injuries and trauma, discoloration, lividity, body temperature, and rigor mortis. Document what the deceased is wearing and the body location and position. Document who was with the deceased at the time of death. If the death was unattended, determine who last saw the deceased alive, date, and time. You may have to check the residence to locate the names of family or friends and to have someone respond to identify the deceased. Obtain the names, addresses, and phone numbers of any doctors who may have treated the deceased, and they may be found on prescription bottles at the scene. Interview the doctor, primary care doctor if possible, friends and family to establish the circumstances surrounding the death. Was the deceased sick? Call the doctor of the deceased and determine if the doctor will sign the death certificate. Notify your supervisor to let him or her know the status of the investigation. Make sure to call the medical examiner's office and advise them of the situation. The ME's office staff will ask for information directly from the death investigation report. It is recommended that you gather as much information requested on the form before placing the call to the medical examiner office, because this will expedite the process versus delaying it substantially. An at-home apparent natural death, when the patient has been under the care of a certified physician and there are no signs of foul play and the physician will sign the death certificate, this is classified by the medical examiner as a medically attended death. You will notify the medical examiner by emailing an attended death report form after the body has been released to either the funeral home or the body removal services. An at-home apparent natural death, where their physician will sign the death certificate, but a funeral home has not been selected yet. In this situation, deputies must contact removal transport services, who will hold the descendant at their facility until notification is made to the family. And obviously, charges incurred will be on the family for those removal services. You will remain at the scene until the deceased is removed. During this time, you should complete a death investigation report or a natural death report, or an attended death report, and different names for it. You can also complete the incident report at this time. Document any medications found at the scene on both reports. If the deceased is to be transported to the medical examiner's office, the body removal service will take the medications and the death investigation report. Before leaving the scene, be sure that the deceased valuables are left with a family member. And if no family is available and the scene cannot be secured, you should inventory the valuables on a property receipt and place them in evidence for safekeeping. So those are the response guidelines there. I will now go through the medical examiner's natural death report and how to go about filling that out. So the medical examiner natural death report is to be completed only on apparent natural deaths where there are no signs of trauma, foul play, history of drug abuse, suicidal ideations, suspicious circumstances, and there is a certified physician willing to sign the death certificate for natural causes. The medical examiner's office must be called and investigate the following deaths. In any of the following circumstances involving the death of a human being, the medical examiner of the district in which the death occurred or the body was found shall determine the cause of death and shall for that purpose make or have performed such examinations, investigations, and autopsies as he or she shall deem necessary or as shall be requested by the state attorney. So if the person dies from any of these, then the medical examiner has to be involved. If not, then you could do a natural death report. So if it's criminal violence, by accident, by suicide, suddenly when in apparent good health, unattended by a practicing physician or other recognized practitioner, in any prison or penal institution, in police custody, in any suspicious or unusual circumstance, by criminal abortion, by poison, by disease constituting a threat to public health, by disease, injury, or toxic agent resulting from employment, or when a dead body is brought into the state without proper medical certification, or when a body is to be cremated, dissected, or buried at sea. So that'll be the circumstances when you can't do a natural death. Now, if you are and you are filling out the report, here are some of the things they're going to ask for you on that report. It'll be events prior to the death / last known alive, events how the descendant was discovered, position of the body and observations, whether there was rigor mortis, liver mortis, lividity, etc., medical complaints, any pertinent witness or family information surrounding the death, or law enforcement officers can attach the report with the completed narrative to this form if you want to just make it a little bit easier. So that'll be filling out that medical examiner's report. Now, in writing the actual report itself and the structure of that, you will structure it like this. The first paragraph is going to be when, where, responding to the scene. You responded, to a call on cardiac arrest, was later determined to be a natural death. Then you're going to say that, you were responding to the scene. You met with the reporting person who called 911 saying that this person was found cold to the touch. You entered what you observed, what you saw. Were they cold to the touch? Were they unresponsive? What position were they in? Then you would mention that fire rescue responded, run number so, engine number whatever. document the lieutenant's name and their ID, and they declared the person dead at what hours. Get to what the reporting person stated next. So the reporting person stated he was in the house. He hadn't heard from, her in so long. It's been so many hours. I checked on her and found her in that position. She was cold to the touch. I didn't move her. I checked for a pulse. I didn't feel nothing. I called 911. Then you could mention that you found who the doctor was. You reached out to the doctor. The doctor said he would sign the death certificate. And then any information the doctor said. So what was he suffering from? What was she suffering from? Heart problems, high blood pressure. Was she on medication for blood thinning, et cetera, add everything the doctor says, and if the doctor doesn't say anything, then ask for any conditions the person was suffering from, any medication they took. In this paragraph, I would also include any medications found on scene. How you would list that is you would give the medication name, followed by the milligram tablets. So you would just give all the medications. So if there's 10 bottles in there, you need to get the name of all 10 medications and the milligram is for the medications that they are, and usually the doctor will also state what they're for. Next, I want to do, you'll next talk about the next of kin. The next of kin was contacted, or maybe they were on scene. They mentioned whether or not they had funeral arrangements. If they do have funeral arrangements, then the funeral home will come pick them up. If not, then you'll need to contact your body removal services. Mention that you contacted them, they arrived at whatever, and they removed the body at so-and-so hours. Then your final paragraph is going to be your observations and what you observed. So you observed no signs of foul play at the scene, no evidence of trauma. They were lying in this position with this going on. They were cold to the touch. They had slight rigor mortis. They had no visible lividity, or maybe they did. They were wearing shorts and a shirt, long sleeves and a pants, whatever they were wearing. Mention that you contacted the medical examiner's office and spoke with so-and-so, ID number so-and-so, who stated to submit a natural death report. Then you would say the natural death report was submitted to the ME's office, BWC activated. That'll be your narrative. Once you're inside the report, you're probably going to have to create a death investigation section inside the report, and that's just going to ask for basically all the information that's going to be on the ME death report, and it's basically going to be the same. So it's all the information you should already have on hand. Now, your body removal services are usually going to ask for the medical examiner's information, and they're probably going to ask for the doctor's information as well. So you need to have all that information on hand. Now, dealing with the death investigation is a lot of work, and is time consuming, and you need a lot of steps throughout the process. So generally, you want to have a lot of backup officers or deputies on hand that can help, get the pill bottles. One person can talk to the family and get all the information. One person can call the doctor's office and get a hold of them and figure out whether or not they'll sign the report and any possible health concerns that they had for the patient, etc. You can have somebody call the body removal services or the funeral home and get that process started while you're working on the report and putting all the information together. So these type of calls are very in-depth, very comprehensive, and a lot of work. But just make sure to follow all the steps, get all the information, and make sure your investigation is comprehensive and thorough. That way you do the family justice and doing a really solid investigation. So like I said, and I mentioned, I will do more death investigations with other types of deaths. We have the infant deaths, homicide, traffic, vehicular manslaughter, and a whole bunch of other types of deaths. We will get into those shortly. Stay tuned for those. Deputy Z signing off. Catch you guys in the next one.